Continuing where we left off, this is a book that came out a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, written by Judy Malloy, published by MIT Press, and it has a whole chapter on the Telluride Infozone, but also many other of the very early internet creative projects. Wonderful book. I'll keep moving through this more rapidly now.
Yep.
All right, here we go. This is just a very early drawing. Again, I'm always doing diagrams or drawings or artworks related to the subjects we're talking about. This was just a very early drawing. I did the drawing as if I was a 5-year-old.
Beautiful summary. Now we come to the place where we met physically for the first time in Mallorca.
Yes, I'll just note that in 1993 in Telluride, the Infozone put on a conference called Telecommunity in September of '93. It was a great conference, and many people came to Telluride to participate. Wired magazine was there live. They wrote about us in their very first issue. And just a remarkable group of people showed up for Telecommunity '93, which was carried live on the Well at that time. And Franz Narada participated remotely in that conference. That's where we first virtually met. And then a couple of years later, I was invited to a couple of times to Mallorca in the Balearic Islands to work on a project called Park Bit with many other. It was an international design competition for a new community adjoining the university and research center there. And that was one of many projects at the time that I participated in various ways internationally.
That was probably a very spectacular project. It was, in a way, a very mixed message. It was 10 or 12 or 15 leading architectural practices all over the world, giving their vision for a kind of settlement apt to the information age. Yeah. Okay.
So I'll just keep moving along. I wasn't directly involved with this project, although I visited and was paying attention to it and met the creators of Colletta di Castelbianco, an ancient village ruin in Liguria in Italy along the French, right next to the French Riviera coast. A little bit inland. This little ruined village was being reinvigorated, re-enlivened, and like many projects, it's a compromised effort. But among the aspects of rebuilding this community was to rebuild the stone structures, but also Telecom Italia put fiber optics into this place, so people could live in this remote place and via communications conduct their livelihoods and their communications lives from there as they could from anywhere in a network society.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in the arts, around this same time, 1984, I had been playing with NASA, the space agency, for about 10 years creatively. And around 1984, I decided to explore another aspect of our information ecosystem, the issues of privacy, surveillance, information warfare, and terrorism. And I started that project and conducted it from about 1984 to about well, it still continues in small ways, but for about 8 years, I looked at the aspect of our information ecosystem that dealt with the issues I just mentioned, and it meant not collaborating with NASA, but collaborating with the military-industrial complex, intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, the CIA, and some European defense contractors and agencies, because some of the technologies that I was using, night vision devices, forward-looking infrared imaging, satellite communication, etc., were not, I was not able to take them out of the US. They were restricted military technologies, and luckily, NATO defense contractors in Europe gave me some help, including, I had a major invitational show at the Venice Biennale in 1986. They had a special section called Informatique, and I created this work that detailed the entire nuclear weapons infrastructure of Italy. It had surveillance video, forward-looking infrared video of the audiences there, and a theater composition for 3 talking computers. I was working with computer speech in the at that time, around 1980. This was 1986. I think I misspoke earlier. This is 1986. I was working with computer speech, and computers were talking about the social and economic implications of privacy, surveillance, information technologies, and information warfare. This show, after about 10 days, was censored and shut down, never to be seen again by the Venice Biennale attendees. In 1996, I left Telluride and went to California to take care of elderly parents in their last years, and was offered, fortunately, a teaching position at University of California, Davis, and also the directorship of a newly initiated community network, the Davis Community Network, which I led for exactly 10 years, 1996 to 2006. It's still an existing, one of the rare existing community networks that still exists and thrives, and because of some remarkable people in that community. And interestingly, all of my connectivity for the last 15 years in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I am, is via the Davis Community Network. So I just connect via a local phone company to the Davis Community Network in California, which hosts my websites, which provides the connectivity we are using right now for me to speak with you. I'm a real proponent of community networking in many ways, as a community, both a community amenity and community economic and ecological social infrastructure, not sending our funds out of our community to some corporate entity that gives nothing back to our communities. Information and energy infrastructure can support education, healthcare, so many other things if people subscribe to those local services, and that revenue is reinvested locally. I'm a proponent of that. Again, I'll move through quickly. One of 1998, I went to Japan again, and they highlighted the Davis Community Network as, at the bottom of this, it says, Davis Community Network is the most advanced community networking example in America. And I think at the time that was correct. This was our logo, the Wi-Fi bicycle. Davis, like Amsterdam and certain other European communities, has more bicycle riders than any other community in the US. Davis is, in fact, to some extent, an attempt to be an eco-community, highly compromised in trying to do so, but a rare example in the US.
It's a university town with about 40,000 inhabitants, so it's much,
Yes,
much bigger.
it is also the home of Village Homes, a very well-known example of a sort of suburban eco-community development that actually was realized, and it's actually quite lovely. All the streets are named after characters or places in the Hobbit stories, and also all homes in this area face toward shared community gardens and public spaces. I won't go into the details of this. I only had very peripheral involvements with Village Homes. A very well-known landscape architect, Rob Thayer, lives in Village Homes, as do many other remarkable people from that place. And one of the problems is they could never get financing. The banks, our financial infrastructure in this country would never again finance a project like this in that area, unfortunately. One of the projects, I'll enlarge this a bit, one of the really neat projects, it's partially still online, it's called Waterworks. We got some funding. So one of my deep concerns has been that here in the US and internationally, we have all been involved in attempting to build out more appropriate infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure, now called broadband infrastructure, which includes everything from fiber optics to wired and cellular and satellite communication. When in fact, what really matters is once we have the infrastructure to communicate, what do we do with it that's going to improve our lives and livelihoods? So I've always been much more interested in applications of our network society than in the infrastructure itself, unfortunately. Again, infrastructure ought to be a regional or a local utility of sorts, or a commons. This was a project that got some wonderful funding over a 3-4 year period, and it was a decision support toolkit that addressed watershed issues in the region around Davis, California, off of the Sacramento River. And I won't go into it, but it was a wonderful project. Turned out to be much too early, again, and a little too complex for most people to use. But one of the things that this project did is it showed that the state of California Water Resources Agency was lying, was not being truthful with the populace of California. They were saying that there was a water deficit in Southern California, Los Angeles area and such, and a water surplus in Northern California. And so they would try to get counties in California to agree on water transfers from the north to the south. The statistics that the State Water Resources Agency was giving to local decision makers was not truthful. In fact, there was a water deficit throughout California. And it was a politically motivated deal by the state. And projects like the Waterworks project, which used actual data that had been collected by the state to show that the state was lying and actually kept localities from making decisions which would have been harmful to their future water usage.
Okay.
Long stories on each of these. One of the professors of nature and culture at University of California, Davis was the great beat poet, Gary Snyder. Beat poet, Zen poet, eco poet, Gary Snyder. And Gary said to me, Richard, why don't you be artist in bioregional residence? I had long been an advocate of bioregionalism since meeting Peter Berg, one of the founders of that concept back in the early 70s. And I created a number of image works like this that were part of my bioregional artworks. I also created a public sculpture in Davis based on a commission, and it was a crash-landed flying saucer with a plaque that indicated that this had landed during the night, had been monitored, was safe for humans to be around. It's quite large, as you can see, and this is a picture of a crash-landed flying saucer in a public park in Davis. People love it.
Yeah, that's in Austrian Waldviertel. They have UFO-Landeplatz, a landing place for UFOs. So that was also a way to make it a little bit more interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm a real believer in my work in community planning and networking, and all of that is comparable. I think I try to instill a sense of theater, a creative sense into that work, rather than a bureaucratic sense of going to lots of meetings and endless bureaucratic processes. Community planning, community networking ought to be theater, which people get involved in, and at the end respond to applause.
Okay.
I also write occasionally as I work. Here's an article from 2005, I believe. I was the generator of the slow tech movement. Just like the slow food movement and other things, I think one of the real issues in our society today is speed. Everything's moving too quickly, and we are making mistakes as we go, and we don't have time to learn from our mistakes because we just have to make the next mistake and the next mistake, rather than moving more slowly, which has to be a part of our eco-mindedness. I'm a proponent of Gregory Bateson's book title, Steps Towards an Ecology of Mind. I think that's critical for the kind of work we're doing. I'm also an advocate of, again, the artist in me has advocated for changing the term artificial intelligence to artful intelligence. Around that time in the late 90s, around the year 2000, I believe, I was the keynote presenter at the International Forum on Townscape Design in Fukuoka in southern Japan. This was a wonderful program, and I had actually an interesting time with some local architects and planners in the Fukuoka area who were doing beautiful work revitalizing brownfields and old energy facilities, coal and petroleum energy facilities that they are turning into clean, community-based recreational areas and educational areas.
I have scheduled another video with Harald Kegler, who was active in East Germany in the worst brownfield of Europe, near Dessau, the Bitterfeld brownfield, and they created a beautiful program there, which was called Werkstatt Industrielles Gartenreich, the regardening of the brownfields. And I hope that will bring much more details to this cycle here. And also I want to stress the fact here at this moment, as you mentioned on the slow tech, the slide before the last slide, that you go for global learning communities. And I know that, and hopefully we will also see that places in similar circumstances can be permanently linked up and share their experiences and inventions. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, lifelong learning is critical to our future, to our network future, to our ecological future. If we're, as a society, not going to invest in lifelong learning and not enjoy lifelong learning, then then everything we're talking about is for naught. It is a waste of our time, because we are not going to achieve our objectives if we don't want to keep learning, and especially learning from our small mistakes rather than not learning and making really big mistakes. Just very quickly, around the year 2000, 2001, the National Research Council in Washington, D.C., actually a very interesting agency, published Broadband, Bringing Home the Bits. It was a book on the local dimension of broadband networking, which was just about to begin at that time. And for about 3 years, I was part of a committee that did a study and research that led to the publication of this book. Again, like many things of its time, it's out of date now, but it was a really wonderful effort. In 2006, my parents having passed away, I decided to move back to the Rocky Mountains Southwest, not to Telluride again, but to Santa Fe, New Mexico, as a base of operations that allowed me to live in a region that I really loved. I have just a deep love for the Rocky Mountains Southwest in the US. It's a remarkable part of the country, and as people who have visited this area or lived here know, it is unlike any other part of the US because of Hispanic. I mean, this used to be part of Mexico long ago, and it also, before that, and continues to be the home of many indigenous peoples and communities and societies and cultures. It's just a rich area, and I came to Santa Fe. I knew the area well, and I moved to Santa Fe in 2006 and immediately created the First Mile Institute in order to address planning and network society issues in a larger regional context rather than just community by community. I thought we have to do this in terms of the economics, the aggregated economic impact and investment requirements. This had to be regional, once a whole state or multi-state region. And that was the work of the First Mile Institute, as well as being advocate for what was newly being called open networking, and especially open fiber networking, which was first introduced in Sweden in those years.
You mean open access networking, a kind of shared common infrastructure that is not monopolized by one provider.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot of details to how it functions, but that was a critical aspect to the work of First Mile Institute, which also became the home to my work in a next phase of art and science collaboration, which I've been doing since the late 60s. My creating the First Mile Institute and advocating for a larger regional effort at networking rather than one community after another community, which almost was like creating non-sustainable islands. And many small communities didn't have the financial capability to do what they had intended to do. So I became increasingly interested in the economics and in a demand side economic model, bottom up, rather than a supply side top down economic model, and in fact top down meets bottom up rather than either or. In 2008,
did you find out about possible changes in the relation between communities, for example, in a region through the network?
Yeah, I mean, yes. And again, we were dealing with many different kinds of communities, many very poor here in New Mexico, many who do not speak English, they're primarily Spanish speaking, or still trying to preserve and speak their indigenous Tewa or other languages. I'm sitting here in my little live-work studio outside of Santa Fe, and I'm on Pueblo Indian lands. I'm surrounded on one side by San Ildefonso Pueblo and Santa Clara Pueblo on the other side. Both just, I can go out my door and walk down the arroyo to the Rio Grande River and to those pueblos, just a walking distance. And that's the nature of New Mexico, great distances between places. So again, very costly to lay fiber. Many people are thinking, oh, we can only do this wirelessly or via pending satellite capabilities like Starlink, which is not available in these latitudes yet. In 2008, the governor of New Mexico, Governor Richardson, through his science advisor, contacted me and said, Richard, we want you to implement your plans for the whole state of New Mexico. We want you to create a broadband integrated network for the state of New Mexico based on your thinking about rural economics. Because urbans, we understand how to do urban, but we have no idea how to network the state of New Mexico or this kind of region. And so from 2008 to 2013, I developed the New Mexico Integrated Strategic Broadband Network. Integrated meaning a highly integrated network with our energy infrastructure, smart grid networks as well. Energy and information have much in common, especially the economics and the local dimension, the demand side economic models for energy and information. So I was very fortunate that the state of New Mexico supported my working on this with my good friend and colleague Andrew Cohill of Design 9, based in the state of Virginia on the east coast of the US. Andrew and I were among the only people advocating for open fiber networks at that time in the US. We were very early, and we had both created very early internet projects. He had created the Blacksburg Electronic Village, which also got a lot of attention the same time that the InfoZone was getting attention. Right. So we did the project, and fortunately also, it was when Obama came into office as president of the US, and we got a lot of federal funding for this project as well, to make it a reality rather than just a concept. Over the years, I've also been very involved in New Mexico tribal broadband networking, very difficult work, and that continues. And that led to, in 2017, the Internet Society, the global NGO, the Internet Society, came to me and said, we'd like to put on an Indigenous Connectivity Summit, and would you help us organize and realize this project? And in 2017, we held the mostly the North and South American Indigenous Connectivity Summit in Santa Fe, with some participation of African and other community individuals. This image was created by a friend of mine from Mexico as a woodblock print. Beautiful image. Local publication called Green Fire Times had published a paper I wrote called The Ecology of Community Networking. Again, I think that's just been my strongest bias, has been to take an ecological approach to understanding the nature being an important concept, the nature of networked society. Here's an arts project I've been involved in for a few years now, alongside my other work. And this was I live here alongside a 4-state region called the Colorado Plateau. just a geophysically phenomenal place. Canyon lands of Utah, the tribal lands of New Mexico and Navajo lands and others. And I wanted to understand the natural energy and information ecosystems of the Colorado Plateau. And this was an arts and sciences field study that's been going on for a few years. This was a 2018 published work on this project early on. A few months ago, I was contacted by my former employer and entity called the Telluride Institute, which is working with the United Nations Mountain Partnership, a global initiative to work on sustainability of mountain areas around the world, because mountains and islands are our most fragile ecosystems under the effects of climate change, as well as other environmental impacts. Mountains are the top of the watershed and are also among the least well-connected places in the world because it's so difficult to reach them. And so I am now leading an effort for a next phase networking for mountain sustainability around the world for the UN Mountain Partnership. That project is currently underway. It's a large project. We're just at very early stages of this, and it's mostly not about just networking or creating physical networks in mountain places, but focusing on the applications of mountain networking. How do you use mapping tools and storytelling tools and sensor data and satellite information to augment decision-making in a networked era? And so this project, I can talk more about this in the future, but this is now underway and I need to move more quickly. So again, in the arts, as part of my interest in the nature and the ecology of information, I have a large long-term project and a book I'm working on called InfoEco, The Nature of Information. That's my overriding creative work, and InfoEco deals both with the ecology and the ecological economy of our networked information society. There are many dimensions to this work, including the difficult aspect of trying to understand the nature of value. What is the value of information? What is the value of quality of life, not material resources? Our capitalist system knows very well how to value material resources under current circumstances. But in order to deal with information or immaterial, the intangibles and externalities of our so-called economy, we treat them as property, almost like material resources. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. And so I've been just spending a lot of time trying to understand the nature of value, and not necessarily monetary value, of information, and essentially being a proponent not of capitalism or socialism or communism, any of the political economy isms, which are none of which take into account what we now know, the little we now know about the nature of our world and the nature of exchange and valuation and what we call economics, care of home. And so I'm a proponent of Earth economics. Unless we really address our planet and our life thereon and therein, we will not be practicing a proper ecological economy.
Okay.
And there's a lot of work to be done on that. That is the basis for our eco communities.
Okay. We
cannot create, and we're almost finished here. We cannot create eco communities under our current ecological systems. They will not be sustainable. Here's another little art project currently underway to debut on Earth Day, April 22, 2001. Mushroom economics. Each of these mushrooms, I'm making hundreds and hundreds of ceramic mushrooms to be placed in public places, to be mapped on a website so people can, and the mushrooms I'm making are out of ceramics, and they have messages in the stem that helps people log on to that map and track our sporadic fungible economy. An artwork. Two more? No, one more, the last one. And I won't even go into this one, but in 2018, a journalist in the UK wrote that I was one of the exemplars of what we now call the Anthropocene at that time. That's enough of this, enough of me.
No, let's just stick to that last point. We had a discussion before about the Anthropocene. And I think this is something that is of generic importance. You said the Anthropocene might be a little bit of a misconception. So
well, yes, I say that. I understand, you know, the meaning, the definition of Anthropocene. It forecasts almost a geological, a geophysical, a geoecological era that is dominated by the actions of human life on the planet. I object to that view. That's again separating us from nature and assuming that we will take a dominant role in the ways we are now proceeding. And I think if we do, the Anthropocene will be the last geological era of humans on the planet. I would advocate for a more balanced and integrative understanding. You know, this is a multi-generational effort. This is not something that can be achieved quickly and may not be achieved at all. I don't really, you know, reality is quite messy. And we do not, human beings do not control their own future, our own future, or the future of our surrounds. We are an integrated part of that, and unintended consequences are as important as any of our intended consequences. And I would advocate, I don't know what to call it, but I would advocate for our being more in tune. And let me just talk about the concept of being in tune. I think that the information, the nature of information and our use and our tuning into the nature of information is a remarkable achievement in human evolution. All living things are tuning organisms. We are all evolutionarily shaped by the electromagnetic spectrum, as we are by the geophysical nature of the land we live upon, the plants we eat, the animals we eat. We are tuned to the ultraviolet radiation, the infrared radiation, the visible spectrum radiation, the audible spectrum, and the highly radiated far ends of our spectrum, the gamma radiation and other aspects that fortunately our planet and its ecosphere, the biosphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, actually protect us from all of life, from harmful radiation that will not protect us in space. I'm deeply concerned, actually, about human life attempting to move to Mars or the moon or other places. And it's well known that we do not know yet how to shield ourselves from harmful radiation. But we live in a radiative environment and remarkably have learned to tune into that environment. We are all naturally, sensorially tuned to that electromagnetic environment. We have ears, we have eyes. Other creatures sense in different parts of the spectrum. And the fact that we are now using technology, essentially sensory aids, as if we were blind or otherwise handicapped, if we were deaf, we are using tools to tune into parts of the spectrum that organically we don't tune into. And that's a remarkable achievement and ought to teach us, if we pay attention and explore those sensory worlds, to be in tune with other living creatures. That was partly the basis for working with marine mammals, tuned to a very different part of the spectrum, and working with gorillas or other creatures, and working with the tools of multispectral imaging and sensing. I think it's phenomenal. I think we are being very, most of us, and especially decision makers. Another point I have to make is I believe that the term the digital divide, which speaks to the fact that many people on this planet are not connected equitably or affordably the way those of us watching this Zoom cast are. The digital divide blames the undereducated, the poor, the handicapped, those who are on the wrong side of the digital divide geographically or for other reasons, are not to blame. The blame is to be put on leaders and decision makers. They are responsible for the fact that we do not have equitable, affordable, and human nurturing communications and information environment. And this is critical to the future of community building.
And more than that. Thank you, Richard. That was a good closing word. And I think everybody saw the wealth of your vision. And I hope that those visionaries that we collect in this House of Visions and many more will come together and show the world that designing this ultimate frontier of man reuniting with nature, which is basically the future of the rural, is more interesting than going to Mars. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, and I look forward to many more years of healthy, creative community building by myself and by all of you out there.